Thank you very much. Dhanyavad. The other thing I need to say before I actually go into medias res is that everything that you're going to hear from me is my own thinking. This does not reflect the views and opinions necessarily of my employer, right? So keep that in mind. This isn't a GE statement. This is a Meinolf Sellmann statement of what you're going to hear now. So we are in the middle of a new industrial revolution. And just like the big industrial revolution that we've seen play out between 1850 and 1950, the repercussions of the technology that we are developing right now will be felt around the globe. Human life as we know it will be changed. Our social orders will be challenged. And at the end of this, we might give rise to a second intelligent species on this planet. So with that being said, I'd like to invite you to, put your cell phones away, stop talking to one another, lend me your ear, and let me take you by the hand on a voyage to see what is AI, what are the technological breakthroughs that fuel it, that suddenly we think this is real and we can actually do this, and lastly, what are the likely immediate repercussions on our social life that we're going to have. This is actually the part that I'm going to spend the most time on. Okay, so what is AI? If you want to ask that question, it's a good idea to start with the question, what is natural intelligence? Now, I do not want to get into a discussion what is intelligence, so let's simply look at the functions that your brain carries out. There is, on a lower level, elementary motor control, vision, hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, tasting, your orientation in space. This is what your brain gives you, right? Then on a higher order, you have the gift of language, right? This is what I'm doing with you right now. I can communicate what I'm thinking so that somehow my information that lives in my brain finds a way into your brain. And you can learn from what I have learned before. I can even do more. I can actually go and invent entire new worlds. I can invent stories, stuff that never happened, and allow you into my fantasy. What a fantastic and magnificent capability of our brain that is. And of course, you can use your brain in order to make sense of the world, to understand its patterns, to derive its physical laws. The interesting thing is that your brain has to do all of this stuff based only on the tiny electrical impulses that are coming in from your body, from your nerve endings. And from there, your brain has to reconstruct the world. This is a metaphor, of course, but somehow in your brain, there needs to be a reconstruction of the world within which you can reason. And the magnificent thing about that reconstruction is that within it you can run simulations. So say you want to climb K2. Now, in natural evolution, what you would do is you send 100 people up there, and the ones that make it apparently came via paths that work. It's a rather wasteful way of finding out what's a reasonable path up K2, right? So what we do instead is we start planning. We come up with pathways on how we could go up there, and if we find that a pathway might lead to sure death, we let the idea die instead of dying ourselves. So we have transferred natural evolution into an evolution of our ideas. And it's very fitting that I would talk to you guys today, because you're all students here at IIT, because really what you're doing right now is you're picking your intellectual genome that you're going to carry forward in the world. The beautiful thing about the intellectual genome that you carry forward, the ideas that you promote, is that you get to select them. Your own genes, you can't, well, you have the genes you have, right? This is the only stuff you can promote. But intellectually, you get to choose the ideas that you want to bring forward and which ideas you want to fight and bring to fore, right? So it's actually, I envy you. I'd like to be as young as that. So now, of course, a reasonable brain would actually tell you, don't walk up K2 in the first place because there's nothing there and it's completely useless and you might die. But of course, you can use your brain to do other plans, like say you're in an ice age and you need to hunt a mammoth in order to have enough food for your tribe. You can come up with a plan that has highest chances of success of trapping the animal while keeping everybody as safe as possible. And sometimes your plan works and sometimes that of the mammoth. It happens. The important thing to remember here is that natural intelligence has evolved as a function of evolution. And that means your intelligence was designed to be a good trade-off between the disadvantages of having a brain compared to the advantages of having a brain while supporting a biological being. Can you think of any disadvantages that it would bring to have a brain? other than that it's easy to get depressed. What's the disadvantage of having a brain? Yes, please. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. This is probably the biggest repercussion of your brain. It takes energy. It takes an enormous amount of energy, in fact. It takes about 20% of the calories that you're having. So if in a normal winter you would have to hunt successfully for 8 mammals, you now have to, because you have a brain, you have to successfully hunt 10 now. Right? That's big. And actually, as a consequence of that, your brain doesn't like to think. It likes to save energy wherever it can, with all the repercussions that that has, right? Because people, rather than differentiating, looking at me as Meinolf Sellmann, you might say, oh, he's a German, he probably likes football and beer, right? These stereotypes that we work with, the xenophobia that we are born with, right? These are all, you know, the fact that we rather like to pigeonhole people rather than getting to know them personally, these are all energy-saving mechanisms of your brain. Ah, bad, right? Bad. There are other repercussions, by the way. So, for example, your brain doesn't like to be shaken up, which is why your head is the only part of your anatomy that has an exoskeleton, your skull, because your brain really doesn't like to be shaken up, right? If somebody hits you in front of your brain, that's it, right? Without a skull, that wouldn't be a good idea. Another one is you can't be without oxygen for more than 3-4 minutes, otherwise you die. These are severe repercussions of having a brain. But probably the most dire one is, in fact, that you have to spend energy. So your brain works on 40 watts. It's a light bulb, right? And that's already a lot. So, okay, so now that we understand that, let's look at the representative of an intelligent species. So here's a doctor, right? So you come there, you have some neck problems or something like this. She takes some x-rays, and you're feeling good, right? So she seems to be the right age. She's young enough to know the recent technology, but she's old enough to have seen a couple of patients, and she probably spent quite a few years in med school and in college and whatnot. So she looks at this stuff and you go, yeah, this is, you know, I'm probably in good hands. Now compare that to a, for now, imaginary server farm that conducts diagnosis for you. Right, so in this server farm, using beautiful Juniper networks, of course, we're going to connect this server farm with every practice in the world. Whenever an X-ray is being taken of a neck, that thing gets a copy, together with the diagnosis, together with the treatment that was then done, and the outcomes that later come out of that treatment. This thing is on 24/7, and it gets to see all the recent cases all over the world. And that thing, when it diagnoses you, doesn't just look at your X-ray. It looks at tens, it looks at hundreds, it looks at thousands, it looks at millions other precedence cases to diagnose your stuff. And while your poor doctor here works with this light bulb there, this thing, for the microsecond that it takes to do your diagnosis, has access to the energy of an entire power plant. Do you still think you can compete? The point here is that the reason why we're interested in artificial intelligence is because we can free the technology, the capability of intelligence from the biological constraints that our intelligence had to evolve under. And that is why it can be so powerful, because you can scale it up. Resources are not the issue, right? If you could suddenly diagnose Alzheimer than anybody else, you will go to whatever length is there in order to invest in there, because you can, frankly, because it's a good business. You can make an arm and a leg selling that kind of diagnostic capability. And that's why there is a race towards AI. It's scale. That's also the reason. So the question that I often get asked is, how come that an AI can do better than their own creators? Well, because it's not biologically constrained. So here's an example. This is actually a very good friend of mine. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. This is Thomas Sandholm. And earlier this year, he demonstrated with his poker playing program, Liberatus, he can beat the best poker players, human poker players in the world. And even though Thomas is one of the most intelligent people I know, he couldn't beat Liberatus in poker. Right? Not possible. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't all about replacing humans and doing better than them. You can also help humans understand processes that are otherwise very, very hard to grasp. So, for example, here's data of the net immigration of countries in the world. And Max Galka actually came up with this really beautiful visualization over here. Every one of these dots here is 1,000 people who are emigrating from one country to another country in the time between 2011 to 2015. Right? And you can see things such as, what might have predecessed Brexit, right? You see lots of people from Poland moving over here, right? Or if you look at the global picture, so wherever it's red, people are leaving more than that they're going in there. You see Syria here, right? Everybody's leaving Syria. Or if you look at Australia, where are they getting their folks from, right? From India, from China, big parts from Indonesia. So this technology can help you understand global processes that are otherwise very, very hard to grasp if you just look at these raw numbers over here, right? And of course, it wouldn't be an industrial revolution if industries weren't interested in it. Now, the point here is that the industries have, of course, used IT for a long time. But they have used IT to somehow get their data straight, to know who their customers are, and something like this. Now they are asking AI algorithms to solve their core business problems. So retailers ask us, what products will sell where? And you might ask yourself, well, what other job is it for a retailer but to know what will sell where, right? They send people to Fashion Week and they will say, well, these red skirts will go in that length this year, so let's put them on the shelves. And now they're not doing that anymore. They are actually asking AI algorithms to make that decision. It's a make or break decision for a retailer. If you only have stuff in the shelves that nobody wants to buy, you don't have a business anymore. You can go bankrupt really, really quick. And similarly, pharma companies, for new drugs that they're developing, they ask, even while they're developing them, what interactions with other drugs are these going to have? Can you forecast that? Oil and gas companies ask us what land to buy, where it's most likely that they might find natural gas, oil. And once they have, they ask us, how do we best exploit this field? Right? So where do we drill exactly? How much water do we pump in there in order to have enough pressure so that it comes out on the other end? And so on. And of course, you've seen the repercussions in news media. Right? It used to be the case that there used to be editorial boards that would filter the onslaught of information that would otherwise come in. And these editorial boards would select what is worthwhile communicating and what isn't, but they would also vet the information that is there. They will not tell you news that aren't news, that are fake. Now algorithms select, based off of what's in there and who else likes something, on whether you might be interested in reading something, whether it's true or not. And in fact, a couple months ago, the top 20 fake news, so fake news meaning stuff that is made up from A to Z, right? Somebody sits there and just makes up stories. And they do that to attract traffic on their web pages and to sell advertisement, right? It's actually good business. The top 20 fake news had more readers than the top 20 actual news. So next time you like something and share something, wait a day. See whether there's any truth to what is there, because you're the last line of defense there. Otherwise, you will have rumors spreading, right? And we can't have that. Okay, hopefully now it's clear what artificial intelligence actually is. It's freeing kind of intelligence from the natural constraints. What is the technology now? So the older ones among you might have heard all of this stuff in the 60s and in the 80s again, because there have been AI hypes before. What's different this time? Well, number one is we have access to way more compute capability than we ever had before. And this is actually a relatively new thing. It was mentioned earlier in this festival that never before could just anybody have access to 10,000 servers for a couple of hours, which before would have required, well, you have to buy the servers, you have to buy system administrators, you have to have a whole team that puts this stuff together. Huge investment, and maybe you just needed that once, right? Now suddenly you have these big cloud offerings that are out there, of the big internet companies mostly, and you have access to compute power that you have not seen before. But the more profound change is actually in the algorithms themselves, in the software themselves. What you see at the bottom here is a deep convolutional neural network to conduct computer vision over here. And so in the 80s, if you look at what people were trying to do, is they were trying to teach the computer the rules of the world and then have the computer derive implications from there. And now we don't do that anymore. There is nobody who sits in front of the computer and tries to explain to the computer what the features of a robot are. Instead, we give it lots and lots of examples of robots and let it derive from there what distinguishes a robot from, I don't know, a cat or a dog or whatever else you want to distinguish it from, right? And the representations, the features, the characteristics that make a robot are being derived automatically. They're no longer prescribed by you. The computer actually makes them up automatically. That is the paradigm shift. We're no longer prescribing this. In a data-driven approach, we let the computer find out these representations of the world automatically. And curiously, this doesn't just work for computer vision or other stuff, it also works for your language. So what you see here is a beautiful illustration here from Magnus Sahlgren, and there's actually a link to his blog entry on LinkedIn, which is very worthwhile reading. You can give a computer a lot of English text to read, with nothing else. You just give him a lot to read. And from there, the computer can build what we call a word embedding. So what you do is you take a word, and then you project it into a high-dimensional vector space. Right? So why would that be any good? Well, if I project this here into 2Ds, right, what you will find in this embedding that was automatically found is that the difference between king and queen here in that embedding is actually the same as that between man and woman. And it's not like I told the computer that that is the case. It just read a lot of English and came up with this automatically. That is the difference, right? Now you can do vector arithmetic in this thing, right? You can do stuff like king minus man plus woman, and you get queen. That's pretty cool, right? That suddenly makes natural language amenable to computation. Now you might have heard that last year, DeepMind beat who is considered the best Go player in the world. And you might have shrugged your shoulder and said, well, didn't we beat like the world chess champion in 20 years ago already, in 1997? Yeah, we sure did. Qualitative difference, right? This here was done with brute force compute power. With Go, you can forget about that. Go is way too big. You can't approach human capabilities here just with sheer compute power. What you need to do is you need to enable, and this is indeed what the DeepMind folks did, is they enabled the computer by playing itself to look at a Go board at any position that might occur during this game and to kind of extract the gestalt from there that would then guide what strategy it would follow. So the big breakthrough here is that we let the computer learn the state space over which we needed policies. Right? Again, this is the paradigm shift. We are no longer prescribing this. We let the computer find out by gaining a lot of experience automatically. And this is actually the only slide that regards my own work here. So far you might have said, oh, well, this is so unfair, Meinolf. I mean, this is always man against computer. And we've already seen that computers are much more powerful. So think Sudoku, right? It's not a fair game. If I teach a computer to play Sudoku, it will do that in a fraction of a second. And for you, thank goodness, if you ever had to fly from New York to India, it takes a while to solve them, right? So it's a good way to kill the flying time. But what if I compete against other people who write Sudoku programs? So this is kind of what we did. So of course, we're not solving Sudokus. We're solving problems that have millions of variables. They're much too hard for any human to actually solve. But there is this annual competition where people submit their algorithms. So the problem will always be solved by a computer. But some algorithms are programmed by people, and then there was us. So earlier in 2016, I went and I programmed for 2 days an algorithm that is very, very generic search algorithm. And then I allowed it to learn from experience on how to make better decisions to conduct a more effective search. Programmed it for 2 days, then I left it alone on a cluster for 2 weeks, and then we entered this competition. The competition has 9 categories. We won 4 gold medals and 2 silver medals and 3 bronze medals. Against teams of PhDs, usually behind each of these competing algorithms, there were, I think, 21 or so other institutions in this competition. They're all professors and PhDs. They know this problem. They have programmed their stuff often over years with multiple people. And they cannot compete against a program that was built in 2 days and then tuned automatically for 2 weeks. That's how powerful that technology is. And now to really blow you guys away, so coming back to the retailers, right? Can you imagine for how many different products they would like to know, well, will this sell? Will this sell? Maybe it will sell in Lower Manhattan, or maybe I can sell it in Germany. Right? Everybody and their brother wants a model these days. And I don't have enough people who can program it. And at GE, I have that problem because we have about, I think we have over 10,000 of these jet engines out there, and we maintain them. So I would like to use the sensor readings that I'm getting from these jet engines in order to forecast when I should be doing maintenance again. But I can't build 10,000 of these models automatically. And in fact, maybe I want one for each individual blade that is actually in there to say, well, you know, does this need work or not? So what we are doing now is we're building an assembly line for models. A platform that automatically builds these forecasting models automatically for millions and millions and manages them automatically. The only time a data scientist needs to look at this stuff is when stuff goes wrong, which also the platform actually monitors automatically and tells. So this stuff is real, very real. This is not utopia. This is happening. So now let's talk about how it will actually change and impact our world. Did you know that the Earth's rotational axis is moving? Have you heard that? So it's always been doing that, right? It's always been moving like 7 centimeters from closer to Europe to closer to Canada or something like this. Now for a couple of years it's actually moving 15 centimeters the opposite direction. So 3 times the natural effect. Do you know why? It's because your continent, your subcontinent, India, is losing weight. You're getting lighter, as was measured by gravitational satellites in the atmosphere. And why would India be getting lighter? Because you're pumping water out of the ground that then evaporates. To the point that the Earth axis is moving 3 times the natural effect. This is a major problem. Right? This is a major problem. And it's not just water that is going to be our problem, it's food. By 2050, we need to double the output of food in order to feed the world. We have scarcity of, we've seen peak oil. We have an ending amount of lithium, right? So think of batteries to fuel your, to store energy in your electric cars. Right? All of this stuff is coming to an end. Scarcity of natural resources, and with that I explicitly include the limited ability of our oceans and of our atmosphere to take in more CO2 without the entire system going haywire, is a major global problem. At the same time, our world is more and more linked. Right? It's very intricate. We have a global economy, we have mutual dependencies, we have to deal with globalization. And of course, in many societies, we have to deal with the fact that the societies are aging. Right? There are fewer young people than there are old people, and who would have ever thought that these guys would ever get old? But they're all over 70 now. Right? These are the big 3 open questions for humanity. Scarcity of natural resources, globalization, and demography, including the problems for healthcare that comes with. I've heard this for 30 years. And we've never had a technology that is as big as our problems. What is the answer to all of this? Improve your efficiency. Do more with less. And that's exactly what AI can do. You can do more intelligent decisions. That's what it's built for, right? So let's look at one particular example of where we are doing particularly bad right now, and that is in personal transportation. So I don't know the Indian numbers, so I came up with the US numbers. Your average American spends 10 to 15% of their annual income on personal transportation, which in the most cases in the US means buying a car and driving it and registering it and fueling it with gas and repairing it and then buying a new one. And then what do they do with it? 95% of the time that car is parked. I just spent 15% of my salary and 95% of the time I'm not even using it. Now, if you go to a big city like New York City or LA, 37% of the inner city traffic that you will find there is people looking for parking. So they have already arrived. So it's reversed. The car used to transport them where they wanted to go, and now the human transports the car where they can leave it to then walk back to where they actually want to go. The total worldwide parking industry, so parking meters, right, is estimated to be worth $100 billion annually. That's the total revenue that they are putting out there. And in comes the self-driving car. Right? What a marvelous solution. So now if you're still thinking, what's the big deal? Self-driving car. So I enter the car and I don't have to drive. Well, you're in good company, because that technology is heavily underestimated. Still in September 2015, the CEO of a major German car manufacturer went on record in front of journalists saying that the self-driving car to him represented a completely unjustifiable hype. Okay, let's see why that is not so. This is in fact one of the changing technologies that you will look back in your lifetime and say, I can't believe we used to drive ourselves. Why is that? Well, the benefit of a self-driving car is not that it drives you when you're in there. The benefit is that it drives without you in there. What would it mean if you didn't have to be in the car when it's driving? Well, for once, you will never ever park again. Right? You will be dropped off at the main entrance and you will leave as if you were the CEO of your own company, right? And you will walk in there and the car drives on. Where does the car go? Does it go park? Hell no. Why would it park? It costs a lot of money. It's bound resources. Send it home. Send it to your family. It can drive around your kids, your family, your sister, your mother, everybody. And then soon you will think, if only I had a bigger family, we could have more cars. This would be good, right? We could have a specialized car for whatever. So suddenly people will go and they will say, hey, maybe I want to be part of a big club that owns lots of cars. So suddenly car sharing becomes a real option because it's so easy to share, right? But you don't do that right now because who drives the car where it's currently needed, right? Well, the car does it automatically. If you look at, so this is a study I think from last year, could be 2015 as well. Car2Go is a car sharing company that already exists today. Of course, they only work in big cities right now because you have to walk where these stupid cars are parked, right? So that doesn't work in the country. But every Car2Go company was estimated to eliminate 7 to 11 cars on the street. The need for 7 to 11 cars on the street. Imagine what that means. 20% of all emissions that a car produces in its lifetime are emitted during its production. So this could mean, easily that we might only need 60% of all cars that we're currently producing going forward. Right? So this means kissing their revenue forecast bye-bye, right, for all the car manufacturers, because we will need way fewer cars once we start sharing them. Remember, 95% of the time your car is parked, right? And that, of course, means that, car designs might specialize, so all of this stuff is good. But now imagine you had a job as a truck driver. You might feel rather different around this technology right now, or bus driver, or cab driver. Or imagine you do pizza delivery. I don't know whether people do that. It's a curry delivery, maybe, so, something. I don't know. But pizza delivery is a big thing in the United States, right? Well, the future of pizza delivery is not that somebody stands at your door, wants a tip, and hands you your pizza. The future is that there is a car honking in your driveway, and you get out and you get your... And there is nobody in the car, which also means that the car looks very different. It will basically look like a heated vending machine with wheels. So if you now look at the labor displacement cost of this technology, it's rather dire. So again, I don't know about the numbers in India. They are probably much, much bigger than these ones here. But for the United States, these are big numbers. So this is McKinsey's think tank who came up with these numbers. The total number of jobs in the United States in transportation is 3.7 million people. And about 2.2 of them are up for grabs by automation. So these people will find themselves without a job. Now let's look a little bit more broadly, away from transportation again to more general AI capabilities. McKinsey actually looked a little bit further, and they found that so if you on the x-axis you put your hourly wage, and on the y-axis you put the percentage of jobs you could replace, automate, with already demonstrated technology that exists today, so this isn't like some bet on that we're going to make some technological breakthrough in the future. With technology that exists today, you can replace 80% of the tasks a file clerk does today. Even a CEO, about 25% of the stuff that a CEO seems to be doing every day could be automated. Right? So the takeaway thing here is, the reason why they plotted it this way is because the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States had found a correlation between your hourly wage and the danger that your job might be threatened by automation. And indeed, that correlation exists. But the more important takeaway message from this chart here is that while about 5% of all jobs that exist today could be 100% automated, 60% of all jobs that exist today could have 30% or more of their tasks automated with already existing technology. And that is important for you guys to know, because it means that no matter what kind of profession you're going to do later on, you can expect that there will be automatic helpers, cognitive little assistants that you will have to deal with. And that's why it's so important for you to understand what this technology can, where its pitfalls are, how well it does, and if you want to rise to leaders in your respective profession, you need to learn this technology early on. Right? This is very, very important for you guys. So this labor displacement that I've been talking about is already very well underway. This is not just something that we fear in the future. If you look right now, 86% of Americans make less than the average salary of $55,000 a year. Now you might think of this old joke that 90% of all car drivers think they drive better than average. They're actually correct. And the reason for that is, of course, how often have you driven a car and you thought, wow, that person drives really well. But each time you're out there, you'll find like two doozies where you go like, how did that person ever get a driving license, right? So it's the same thing here, right? So all the outliers are in one direction. Most people have a modest salary, and then there are people like data scientists who make an outrageous salary, who move the arithmetic mean up, so that indeed 86% of Americans can make less than the average. Right? This is not an artifact. This is actually true. 20 million Americans, this is about 9% of our labor force. So there are 245 million people in the United States between 16 and 65 able-bodied. They're not handicapped, they're not ill, nothing. 9% of that, about 20 million Americans, are not taking part in the labor force. What does that mean? They're not looking for a job, they don't have a job, they're not handicapped, they're not retired, and they're not studying. They've given up. 20 million Americans. And while some of them might just have enough money to just, hang out at home, most of them are not doing so. In 2016, in China, which is not exactly known for exorbitant labor rates, 60,000 Foxconn workers were replaced by industry robots. And in fact, there is already new pressure now from outsourcing manufacturing that's happening in China to doing it in Vietnam and doing it in Indonesia, where people still cost even less than your average Chinese worker. And now if you look at the US labor market, in 1990, 56% of all jobs that people had were routine jobs, meaning either routine manual or routine intellectual jobs. This percentage is down to 41%. So this displacement is real, and it's happening, and it's hurting people. So let's look a little bit closer here at this. This is an interesting way of slicing the job market, right? Manual, cognitive, and manual and cognitive and routine and non-routine jobs. So on the left-hand side here, I have all the manual jobs. On the right-hand side, I have the cognitive jobs, and on the top, you have non-routine jobs, and at the bottom, you have routine jobs. If you have a routine manual job, you'll be out of a job within 15 years. Right? If you have a job in construction, in manufacturing, in services, this is where the competition is the highest. Now, if you have a nice job here in a cognitive job, right, so kind of an office job, but it's a routine job. Say you work in an administration, you check whether somebody brought all the stuff they needed in order to get a building permit or stuff like that. That will be automated. Your job will be gone. It won't exist anymore. In fact, if you're a doctor, you're conducting a routine cognitive job. And if you doubt that, think what you as a patient would feel if your doctor would go, oh, that's interesting. You would not feel good. Right? You would shake their hand and you would say, well, I'm going to find myself a doctor who's seen another 100 patients like me, for whom I'm the most boring person who could walk in here. Because at least they know what the heck they're doing with me. Right? You don't want your doctor to be intellectually stimulated by your case. That's the last thing you want to do. They conduct a routine job, and that's why their job will go away. Look at manual, non-routine jobs. So there's a little bit of hope there. So caretakers, for example, right? So I mean, for a long time, we will want people to take care of people. But how long will you be able to actually do this? So the only sweet spot here seems to be what all of you guys are probably headed for. Non-routine cognitive jobs. Right? Be managers, be comedians, entertain people, researchers, right? Stuff like, the stuff that I do. The problem is, if you think, well, okay, so beautiful, we're safe, think again. Because you're part of a society. And if everybody else is hurting, you will not be doing well either. So, let me ask you a question. Do you know who, in the Middle Ages, who crowned the king? Who crowns the Queen of England? I mean, it's even when that happened in, was it early 50s or so, or late 40s or so? Who crowns the Queen? Somebody know? Sorry, I'm not hearing. Yeah, exactly, the Archbishop, right? Some holy guy. And this is actually an illustration of the coronation of Charlemagne by Pope Leo. Why a pope? Why? So not many cultures actually know coronation, but intronization. Where is a Maharaja intronized? It's in some holy place, right? And there's always some priest present when that is happening. In many cultures, the king even rises to deity status. The Tenno in Japan, the pharaohs in Egypt. Why is that? Well, it's because you need to establish that you're a king. And you don't want people to question that you're the king. So how do you justify that? Well, you weren't elected king. You didn't take the power. You were born into the position. Which means that a higher power actually appointed you the job. So anybody who questions you questions the deity, right? Questions the creator or whoever is in charge. This is how societies in during autocratic and aristocratic times were justifying that there were some people in the society who were well off, who had something to say, and other people who were not doing so well and who had nothing to say. Right? It was a religious thing. Then, of course, came this marvelous people across the Atlantic who gracefully took me in when I was looking for a job in 2003. And they suddenly found it self-evident that we are all created equal. But with that, they decidedly did not mean that we were now all going to be having the same net worth. Right? There were still people living in penthouses while other people are living in ghettos. So how do you square that? Right? There is no more, hey, you were born into these circumstances. Well, it was squared with the narrative of what we loosely refer to as the American dream. You had the same opportunity by law, and consequently, the way you live is essentially results in your circumstances. So you can't really blame anybody because your choices got you there. So this narrative of you being able to moving from a tramp to a millionaire is what stabilizes the society. Otherwise, why would I accept that I'm living in this shabby rat hole next to the train when a couple blocks further somebody has way too much space in their penthouse? Why would I ever be willing to accept that other than when I think, well, through my own virtue, if I apply myself, if I believe in myself, I can do better. So what does that mean? It means that if you have suddenly, so imagine that, through automation, and what else do we bring to the table other than muscle and brain? And now machines can do both. Imagine that suddenly 20% of your labor force fall below the productivity line. They will not be able to be productively employed. You think you can tell them with universal basic income that everything is fine? Because that's the usual answer that people are giving here. They're saying, well, let's have universal basic income. You could keep the status quo and tell everybody, well, you don't have to do anything anymore, and you would still not have a stable society, because the outlook is gone. Right now, through my own virtue, I can work myself out of my circumstances. You cannot tell every fifth person who should be working that they cannot do that anymore. And that's why, even though you're living in that green quadrant over there, you will not be fine if everybody else is hurting. So this is within your society. And this requires that the humanities, the social scientists, and basically all the societies start having a discourse about this, because this is coming. In fact, this is already very much underway. Now, there's another dimension to this, and that is the relationship of societies among each other. So imagine you have a nice idea for a new app. You want to produce suits, stuff like this here. And people can, on their app, they can say, well, these are my measurements. And I want this suit. This is a nice shape. I like that. I want it in this pattern, this color, this fabric. Go and produce it. Where would you produce that suit? Assuming you have AI technology, so you don't need any human workers. Where would you want to produce that suit? Sorry, a little bit louder? Can somebody relay? It doesn't arrive here. So, well, I mean, there is another cost to transportation, that is you have to wait. Right? If I'm on my app and I'm sitting in New York, I probably want my suit in 3 days. So chances are I'm not going to produce that in China anymore. Right? I will probably want to produce this locally, close to the consumer. Provided, the material costs are the same everywhere. Anyhow, energy costs, say, are comparable, and environmental costs wouldn't matter that much. Right? If that was all the same, where you want to produce is close to the consumer. What does that mean? Well, it means that China will no longer be the workbench of the world. It means we are facing a new phase of deglobalization. The work will return to the West, to the industrialized countries. The jobs will not, because all of this stuff, the tailoring that is necessary to build a suit like this, will be completely automated. So you will see deglobalization accompanied with rising unemployment and rising inequality. And what happens when people are hurting economically, the least patience they have for is people who they think do not belong to their group. Does that ring a bell if you're looking at the current world? If you're looking at the news, if you open the newspaper, this is happening right now. So then you have rising nationalism. My country first. That is what everybody says. And then you ask for strong leaders. You have no patience anymore for democratic process, for the slow way how democracy works. And you equip your leaders with powers to just, to implement their super simplistic recipes with which they say they're going to bring you back to greatness. And when those simple recipes fail, these leaders have nowhere to point but outside the country, because they were ruling this one with all the power you have given them. And then you find yourself in conflict with other nations, and you have armed conflicts, leading to more deglobalization, to more suffering, to more inequality, and more nationalism. This is a vicious circle, and this is not inevitable. The point is, as many people as possible, and this is really the reason why I'm actually here, as many people as possible need to be aware of this fact to prevent it from happening. What is required is a compassion, and I know that this is asked much, right? If somebody's hurting in Indonesia and doesn't have access to clean water there, that needs to hurt you as much as somebody in your own family didn't have access to clean water. This is asked a lot. But otherwise, we are headed again, and remember what happened between 1850 and 1950 during the last Industrial Revolution. We ended up in 2 world wars. Now, you can't really blame this on AI, right? So I started so positively saying, hey, well, there's fantastic technology, and you're all feeling now, well, where the hell is this guy taking us, right? any medicine that is strong enough to cure the diseases that we have, right? So think again, scarcity of global resources, globalization and demography. Anything that is big enough to tackle that will have side effects. The point is we need to mitigate them. In 1850, we had no idea that we needed labor laws, that we needed unions, that we needed free weekends and paid family leave and vacation and all of these things. It took us a long time to come up with these rules in order to make the technology work for us, rather than us suffering. It's paradoxical, right? We set out AI to improve efficiency, and we are facing the risk of the ultimate inefficiency that there is in the world, which is war. So I need you guys to get involved. This is really why I'm here. I need you guys to get involved. You need to start a discourse. How do you want this, so with respect to the previous slide, how do you want to share the increasing wealth that is there due to this technology? Because our existing way of distributing wealth by labor is most likely not going to work anymore. And we have to think about a new way of doing this. And at the same time, you all need to become peace ambassadors. Okay, so with that plea, let me summarize what I've been telling you today. So the first thing you learned is AI is uncompromising, right? This is not a biological function, and while your brain wouldn't be much good if you had to eat 2 mammoths an hour, well, you know, for a server farm that does fantastic diagnostics, why not, right? So this is not biologically constrained. Behind the curtain, really, what drives these breakthroughs are these new algorithms that find these representations of the world automatically, find them in the data. They're no longer prescribed by humans. And on the balance sheet here, this is our best bet of dealing with our global problems that we're having. But at the same time, anything that is big enough to tackle that will have side effects. And in particular, you can expect economic disruption that will happen. This needs to be managed. It needs to be changed. Otherwise, it will result in violence. So that's my plea to you guys here. Get involved. I need you to go out and talk to your family, to your friends, to your local politicians, to entrepreneurs that you know, people who work in the humanities, and talk to them about this, because it's happening. Technological change changes societies, and AI is massive, is big, and is real. So because it's so important, let me say this again. I need you guys to go out there, get involved, and shape this change peacefully as one global humanity. Dhanyavad.